I can't get in there. There's no way.
911, what's the address of your emergency?
It's my neighbor's home. It's on fire.
Do you know if anyone's home?
Yeah, they're home. The whole house is on fire.
When cops responded to a house fire in Guilford, New York on March 1st, 2017, they didn't expect to uncover a chilling plot lifted straight from the script of a blockbuster Hollywood motion picture. Standing outside, Ernest Franklin kept quiet about the most important detail. Their son was still in the house.
Hey, we got one inside the northwest east corner.
Inside the charred remains of the house, firefighters uncovered their son. And with him, the clues to a calculated plot meant to hide a terrible crime.
In the back room, sleeping. How old is the person?
Known location and
16.
camera.
I can't get to him. I tried to come around the other side. I can't even get close.
As the flames died, a trail of secrets began to reveal the terrifying scope of their plan.
Because I shot a kid in Afghanistan, mother and son. So the one way I gave back was doing foster care, and he came along. From day one, I wanted to adopt him.
Don't take the fall for him if you know something, or don't leave anything out.
A little after the fire, it was said in a matter of minutes, $2,000 was gone.
Who said it? One of them said it.
I know, and I'm not telling.
What happened to JR?
Yeah, time for our lawyers.
He's over here.
I want to walk my dogs and come back to this.
I tried going on the backside to see if I could get JR out. And when I went around back, the fire was inside the nursery. Tried breaking the windows to get in, and it was too hot.
When the fire started, neither Ernest nor Heather had been home. Ernest had run out chasing after one of his dogs that had run into the woods, and Heather had run out to get some sleeping medicine. The firefighters were taken aback by how Ernest and Heather appeared to be very calm and collected, watching their home burn to the ground. But the true horror was about to be revealed next. It wasn't until the firefighters specifically asked that the couple revealed that their adoptive son, Jeffrey, was still inside. The revelation sent the firefighters into a frenzy, and they poured every ounce of effort into rescuing the teenage boy.
In the back room, sleeping. Fire. How old is the person?
Known location and
16.
camera. Action, going to the north.
I can't get to him. I tried to come around the other side. I can't even get close. 09 Tango.
109 going.
09 Tango. Being advised that there's still one person in the house.
When one of the firefighters asked Ernest where Jeffrey was in the house, Ernest pointed to a room, and the firefighters were able to break in through the window. However, Jeffrey was not in that room. Instead, he was spotted in another part of the house.
Yeah, come up over on the side. We're able to get up over here. Hey, we got one inside the northwest east corner. Yeah, it's in this back corner over here. We can't even get close to it. Oh, there's a power supply right here. Feel helpless. Watch the boards. There's a couple nails sticking up. I got light here. All right, sir, we're gonna do our best. Sorry. Yeah, it's getting fully involved now.
I can't break in here on a line and we're stuck. You know what I mean? I can't go.
Yeah, I know. We felt the same way when we walked. We ran up here. We're like, oh my God, we had no idea.
No.
It's hot.
Yeah. Water's coming, guys. We just got a lot of air coming first.
It wasn't safe enough for us to put our firefighters inside the building. So once we determined exactly where Jeffrey was last seen, we decided to focus our attack onto the fire by standing from the outside of the building and trying to extinguish that as quickly as we could.
They had to take a roundabout way to get to him. That, in and of itself, took up more than 10 minutes of precious time. They rushed to rescue him, but sadly, it was too late. Jeffrey's body was found on his bed inside the house.
We started what we call delayering the room, so a lot of the debris and everything that fell off from the ceiling or from the walls or anything, we started removing some of those items piece by piece, going through and looking for any type of remnants of Jeffrey that may remain. One of the first things we found was actually the bed springs, and then we eventually ended up finding Jeffrey's body. We found him laying on the mattress as though he was sleeping. But something you never forget, and it takes a toll on everybody that's there.
With a heavy heart and a shaken soul, one of the firefighters came out with Jeffrey's burnt body in his arms.
Firefighters found Jeffrey in his bedroom. They carefully lifted him up, and we carefully brought him down. We carefully placed him into a body bag that the funeral home brought out. That's when it became real. It became very real. And we carefully walked him down the drive again, through the mud, through the terrain. We placed him inside of a hearse, and it was my job just to follow that hearse all the way down to the morgue. I don't know. I can't describe the feeling. It was just, people pass away every day, but this kid suffered so much in how he passed away.
As the guilt of not being able to get to Jeffrey in time began to consume the firefighters, Jeffrey's charred remains were sent for an autopsy. As Heather and Ernest picked up the pieces of what was left of their lives, the report from Jeffrey's autopsy came back with some chilling results, giving the case a direction the detectives had never anticipated. It was then, when the detectives looked at the report, that they realized Jeffrey's death was no accident. Initially, the detectives had thought that Jeffrey got trapped in the house when the fire started and died due to severe burns and smoke inhalation. However, the post-mortem told a different story. According to the autopsy report, there was no evidence that Jeffrey's lungs had been exposed to fire. There were no signs of smoke or soot in his mouth, trachea, or bronchi, which clearly suggested that the fire was not the cause of his death. In fact, the medical examiners believed Jeffrey had died well before the fire even began, which meant that the delayed response by the firefighters had no impact on his fate. Jeffrey's body had sustained severe burns, and the extensive fire damage made it impossible for the medical examiner to determine his exact cause of death. But there was evidence to believe that Jeffrey was killed using violent force before the start of the fire. Initially presumed to be a casualty of the flames, the police soon uncovered a more sinister narrative hidden beneath the horrifically tragic event. The detectives could never have imagined the dark conspiracy that was at play. Jeffrey R. Franklin was born in Binghamton on July 22, 2000, and was affectionately known as JR, a nickname which came from the initials of his birth name. Like his biological mother, Jeffrey was born deaf and had special needs. Due to his parents' inability to care for him, Jeffrey spent his first 10 years moving between family members and various foster homes. During his first decade, he was shuffled among 3 families, struggling with the difficulties of being born deaf and living with autism and being mute. The homes in the Binghamton area where he stayed were ill-equipped to meet his needs. While in foster care, he endured abuse, often going to school with visible bruises. He had limited access to sign language education, which made communication a constant struggle. Jeffrey was difficult to care for. He required nighttime pull-ups and couldn't be left alone even as he grew into his preteen years. Yet, despite everything, Jeffrey radiated joy and a deep love of life. Armed with the knowledge that Jeffrey's death was not an accident, the detectives were determined to learn the truth and figure out what truly happened in the Franklin residence that night. They first interviewed the firefighters who arrived at the scene and tended to the fire after Ernest's neighbor made the 911 call. But little did the detectives know they'd stumble upon something very unexpected. Ernest and Heather's behavior and actions struck them as extremely odd on the night of the fire. On top of that, they told the detectives that neither Heather nor Ernest seemed concerned about Jeffrey and instead focused on their pets trapped inside. Moreover, the firefighters were quite sure that Ernest pointed them towards the wrong room when they asked him about Jeffrey's location.
He's in the back room, sleeping. Fire. How old is the person?
No location and camera.
This seemed like an intentional and conscious decision which wasted precious minutes as the firefighters had to take a longer route to get to the trapped boy. The detectives then spoke to Dominic Gildersleeve, who had been Heather and Ernest's longtime neighbor and friend.
Ernie's my friend, you know. There's some things I'm not comfortable story-wise that aren't...
Just tell us what you think.
We don't truly know what happened up there.
We're trying to...
Right, but
a 16-year-old died, so...
Right. Something doesn't feel right. I don't know how to explain it.
But your own personal opinion as a person.
My own
father,
personal opinion, father. Why did he come down here to call my mom to try to save us?
How do you know that's the case?
I can only assume. I don't know. Because, again, with being able to see how clear it was that it was on fire, how far away was he?
Right, to
not know that it was on fire.
Now, have you had any conversations with him in regards to what happened before or after?
Now, I have not talked to him about any details because with him having PTSD, I'm not triggering it. I just not, you know.
And how do you know he has PTSD?
This is what Ernie's always told me. Even fireworks set him off. He can't be around fireworks. When we had fireworks out here, he actually had to drive away because that was too much for him. I mean, it's pretty obvious.
Sure.
You know.
When asked about Heather and Ernest's relationship with Jeffrey, Dominic told the detectives that initially the couple welcomed Jeffrey into their family with open arms and were very happy when they adopted him in late 2011. They provided him with an environment of love and care. Jeffrey was extremely fond of trains, and they nurtured that interest. They bought him train sets and frequently took him on a railroad tour in Cooperstown. But over the years, things started to change. There was tension. Heather acted frustrated with Jeffrey because of his condition. Jeffrey was on the autism spectrum and behaved like a much younger child. At 16, Jeffrey's behavior was more like that of a 10-year-old boy. While Dominic never saw Jeffrey misbehave with anyone, he said that Heather often talked about Jeffrey acting out and throwing tantrums. He told the detectives that Heather and Ernest had even put an alarm on Jeffrey's door to stop him from leaving his bedroom at night and making a mess. Dominic could tell that with time, Heather and Ernest's affection towards Jeffrey began to fade away and was eventually replaced with frustration. Whenever Heather talked about Jeffrey, she sounded very bitter and burdened. Dominic also had 2 children, both of whom were on the autism spectrum, and that's why he felt some sympathy towards Heather and Ernest. However, their frustration with Jeffrey seemed exaggerated to him. When the detectives interviewed the neighbor who made the 911 call, they realized that Jeffrey's adopted father, Ernest, needed to be looked at more closely. The neighbor told the detectives that instead of going inside the house and even trying to save Jeffrey, Ernest knocked on their door and asked them to call 911. Soon, a twist was going to come in the form of a surprise witness who was none other than Ernest's own sister.
How long has Jeffrey been living with Ernest and Heather? I assume they got him when they were together?
Yeah.
Okay.
2005 or 6 as a foster kid. And then 2016 was when they adopted him. And that's when things changed.
All right, so describe the change to me.
They pulled him out of regular school to homeschool him.
Okay. Do you know why they did that?
They said they didn't like the school system.
She recounted to the detectives a conversation she'd overheard, a conversation that had left her utterly shocked.
How is your relationship with Ernie? Do you have any bad blood with him? And don't feel bad about it.
No.
That's not your position. We need to know that. It's a question I have to ask. Was there anything else that stands out?
There was a comment that was made.
Okay. What was made?
It didn't sit well with me.
Okay. Tell me about it.
It was a little after the fire.
Okay.
It was said in a matter of minutes, $2,000 was gone.
Who said that?
I don't remember. It was just a comment that's stuck.
Who said it? One of them said it.
I know, and I'm not telling.
Here's what I see. I see you trying to be loyal to your brother because you're his sister. But I think considering the circumstances, I'm not trying to tell you what you should do, but if I were in your shoes right now, I would shift that loyalty to Jeffrey
No.
and give us the truth. And I know it's hard for you.
I don't think it was like meant for anybody to hear because it was kind of whispered. But because I was standing so close, I heard it. So I didn't say anything.
Who said it? Did Ernie say it to Heather?
Ernie said it.
His son had just died, and he didn't seem concerned about him at all. In that conversation, he specifically pointed out that it would cost him so much money every month to cover the losses. All the information the detectives were able to gather about Ernest made them more and more suspicious of him. He quickly became a prime suspect in the case of Jeffrey's death, as there was evidence that Heather was out shopping at the time. It was now time to call him in for an interrogation.
What do you think happened to JR then?
Like I've been telling you, the fire. That's all I know.
Okay, but we know that's not the case.
Then I don't know.
Possible. The ME can say, and he's been doing this for decades.
We wanted Ernest to know that we knew Jeffrey was dead before the fire, and we wanted to provide that information to him to see how he was going to react.
He can say that he did not die in the fire. When people die in the fire, there's a lot of evidence. You have soot that you're breathing in, right? And carbon monoxide in your blood builds up, and that's what kills you. It's not usually the heat, it's not the flames. It's smoke inhalation. And two ways they know smoke inhalation. Soot in your mouth, in your nose, in your trachea, and in your lungs. And a carbon monoxide level in your blood that's high. JR had none of that. He had no soot. He didn't breathe in any soot. And his carbon monoxide level is what ours are now. Okay. Which indicates that he's not breathing in at the time the smoke gets to him in his room. And the only reason he's not breathing in when the smoke gets there is because he's not breathing at all. He's already dead. Something happened to JR.
When the detectives confronted him about their suspicions and his odd behavior regarding Jeffrey's death, he told them an emotional and shocking tale.
We were hoping that he would then break down, maybe give us a confession, tell us exactly what happened that night. He reacted in more of a stubborn way. Throughout the interview process, he was cold, he was unsympathetic, never apologized for what happened to Jeffrey.
Something happened to JR, and then your house catches fire.
Why would I burn my house down?
To hide what happened to JR.
Why would I kill him?
These things happen sometimes. Things weigh on you. I get that. We're both parents. We
do not understand what weighs on me.
You're right. I'm not you. What I'm saying.
You don't even know why I got into foster care.
I don't. Why don't you tell me why?
Because I shot a kid in Afghanistan. Mother and son. So one way I gave back was doing foster care, and he came along. From day one, I wanted to adopt him.
Ernest had served in the Army for a year and a half. He joined the U.S. Army right out of high school in August 2001. He further told the detectives that tours of duty in Iraq and Afghanistan in 2002 and 2003 left him disabled and depressed. Ever since then, he'd been suffering from PTSD. The guilt of taking a young soul's life away still lingered. And what the detectives learned next felt like a betrayal to them. The emotional story Ernest had told the detectives about his guilt of killing and wanting to become a father ever since then was nothing but a complete lie.
We had already obtained his military records, and we knew what he was stating wasn't the truth. He'd never had any combat time in Afghanistan.
We know something's done to him. We know this. And you know it too. In there, I know you know it. And until you talk about it, it's not going to go away. It's just going to be in there. It's going to fester.
You don't think I don't know that, do you?
Hey, I know you know this, but I'm trying to remind you.
I think it's time for our lawyers.
At that point in time, we have to stop talking to him and get him the lawyer that he requested. But it left a lot of unanswered questions.
Detectives then called in Heather for an interview to see if she knew anything about her husband's suspicious behavior. Heather, who was 27 weeks pregnant with Ernest's child at the time, claimed that she had no clue about anything and didn't utter a word against her husband.
Don't sell yourself out because you're trying to protect him. You're going to end up with your back to the corner.
During the interview with Heather, we told her that Ernest was going to be charged with murdering Jeffrey. And we told her that she needed to put herself and her unborn child first. And if she knew anything, she had to tell us.
He could be putting some on you, thinking that it's going to take it easy on you because you're pregnant and not him, and vice versa. Don't take the fall for him if you know something, or don't leave anything out. Let's just say that. Don't leave anything out. Don't leave anything out. Because when he's on the stand and he's in the hot seat, he's going to tell more of the truth. And if he indicates anything of your involvement or your knowledge, as long as you tell us ahead of time. Okay, I'm just saying. And we're just trying to confirm your story.
He doesn't care about you. You can protect your baby.
I don't know how I can protect them.
The truth. And don't leave anything out. If you left anything out, we'll clear the slate and start fresh from here forward. And I'm not going to hold it against you. I won't hold it against you if you left something out, okay? So let's go from here forward, clean slate. What did you leave out?
Nothing that I can think of.
There's got to be something. There is something.
There's too much air.
When asked about her whereabouts on the night the fire engulfed her house, she told the detectives that she'd been out shopping for medicine that night because she couldn't sleep. She left her house late on February 28, 2017, and visited 2 shops looking for medication. However, when the detectives retraced her tracks, they learned that her search for medicine turned into a nearly 3-hour journey through 2 counties that would have covered at least 70 miles. Heather first drove to the Walmart in Norwich, then made her way to Price Chopper in Sydney, explaining later that she was searching for a better deal. After finishing at Price Chopper, she returned to Walmart once more before heading home. When asked, Heather granted the detectives permission to go through her vehicle, and when they did, they hit a jackpot. Although the CCTV footage from the stores confirmed her whereabouts, it also revealed something that would make the detectives question Heather's story and place her under a microscope. Heather stopped at the Walmart in Norwich, but then she returned to the vicinity of her home in Guildford from 12:42 a.m. to 12:46 a.m. She left the house and drove to Price Chopper in Sydney again for about 10 minutes. Then she drove around Bainbridge and Coventry before returning to the fire scene by 2:18 a.m. on March 1, 2017, when the house was already on fire. When the detectives looked at the CCTV footage from both of the stores Heather went to looking for the medicine, the video evidence confirmed that she did not go to the aisles in either store where the drug was stocked. It didn't look like she was searching for the medicine, and she never made a purchase. When the detectives confronted her about her actions, she also lawyered up. From that point on, both Heather and Ernest stopped cooperating and refused to speak to the detectives at all. Secretly investigating the Franklin family's past with Jeffrey, detectives learned a few things. Back in 2011, Jeffrey became eligible for adoption, and by the end of that year, his Aunt Jennifer and her husband were able to find a permanent home for him. A couple who deeply desired children but couldn't have their own wanted to take Jeffrey as their son. Jeffrey's aunt and uncle offered him a choice. He could either continue living with them or have a mom and dad of his own. Excited, Jeffrey chose the latter, longing for parental figures in his life as he'd never truly experienced having parents. Heather and Ernest welcomed Jeffrey into their home with open arms. Heather, who knew sign language, was able to communicate with her new son in a manner that made him feel truly understood and valued. However, this new life, so promising and bright, felt almost too good to be true. And soon, Jeffrey became the victim of a dark and sinister plot that cut his young life short. Even after Jeffrey's death, Heather and Ernest didn't seem to be affected much by the loss of their only child. They were chiefly concerned about the financial loss the fire had caused them and wanted to rebuild their home as soon as they could. Heather and Ernest continued to seek help online. Ernest shared his family's GoFundMe page 3 times on his Facebook account. On March 19, 2017, Heather posted a link to her Check Twice digital wish list of items the couple needed. As Heather and Ernest sought a new start, investigators quietly prepared to build a case against them. But they still needed stronger evidence to charge them. And what came next in the investigation made the detectives realize what Heather and Ernest had truly done on the night of February 28, 2017, and revealed the disturbing source of information for their wicked actions. At some point, when Ernest and Heather were being questioned by the police, they mentioned that the last thing they did before their house suddenly went up in flames was to watch a movie called Manchester by the Sea. The plot of the Oscar-winning movie was based around a man who accidentally killed his children in a house fire. It was this film that gave them the idea that they wouldn't be charged for murder if Jeffrey died in an accidental fire. A father, played by the actor Casey Affleck in the film, is spared prosecution after being told that a person cannot be charged for an accidental crime. But while his performance was convincing, the same couldn't be said about Ernest and Heather. According to the firefighters who inspected the Franklin house, the fire began in the southern end of the Franklin home. It was concluded that after they'd killed Jeffrey, Ernest Franklin started a fire by lighting a wood stove. The vent pipe was functioning properly, but it was discovered that Ernest left the stove door open to allow the fire to spread and consume the house. The firefighters told the detectives something so crucial that it further confirmed Heather and Ernest's evil intentions. The firefighters told the detectives that when they found out about Jeffrey still being in the house, both Heather and Ernest tried to stall and misdirect the firefighters to the best of their abilities, possibly to make sure that Jeffrey was dead and any evidence they might have left behind burnt to ashes. Heather and Ernest came to realize that parenting Jeffrey was going to be more difficult than they had thought. In a few posts on Facebook, Heather had publicly shared her frustrations, where she talked in detail about the challenges of caring for Jeffrey. In one post, she shared that there is a very big strain in the family relationship because of Jeffrey's special needs, and specifically pointed out the trouble she was having with Jeffrey's bowel and urine control issues. Tracking Heather and Ernest's social media activity further, detectives learned that sometime around mid-2016, Heather became pregnant with Ernest's child. Heather expressed her excitement about her pregnancy by posting about it often on social media. In January 2017, she even shared her ultrasound images, celebrating the news that she and her husband of nearly 6 years were expecting their first child. Now that their first biological child was on the way, Heather and Ernest seemed to decide that they no longer needed Jeffrey. Even after Jeffrey's death, Heather and Ernest kept up with their act of expressing grief and sorrow through their social media posts. On March 5, 2017, they even had a celebration of his life at C.H. Lander's funeral chapel and handed out toy train imprinted invitations for the occasion. But the detectives knew of the couple's facade, and they had had enough. After 3 weeks' worth of investigation into Jeffrey's death, detectives made their next move. Armed with witness statements and an autopsy confirming the unnatural cause of death, police arrested Ernest and Heather Franklin on March 22, 2017. They were charged with second-degree murder, third-degree arson, and tampering with physical evidence. 2 days later, on March 24, 2017, the couple was formally indicted on charges of arson and second-degree murder related to Jeffrey's death. At the time, both pleaded not guilty. Bail was set at $250,000 cash for Ernest Franklin and $125,000 cash for Heather Franklin. Michael Trossett, Heather Franklin's lawyer, asked for a more reasonable bond, claiming that Heather's pregnancy was of high risk. And so, while Ernest remained behind bars in the Chenango County Correctional Facility, Heather was released on bail in April 2017. She moved in with her friends who helped her during her pregnancy, and just days after her bail, Heather gave birth to a baby boy. The Franklins were well respected by their neighbors and friends, and while Ernest and Heather Franklin were awaiting trial, the neighbor mentioned earlier, Dominic Gildersleeve, started a GoFundMe page to support the couple. Through that page, he was able to raise more than $11,000 to help Heather and Ernest fight their cases and rebuild their lives. Heather's lawyer, Michael Trossett, said that Heather was innocent until proven guilty, and that the prosecution's allegation about her being inspired by the movie Manchester by the Sea was a leap. On the other hand, Ernest's public defender, John Cameron, went a step further. He and his office hired a forensic pathologist to reinvestigate the entire case, stating that the detectives didn't cover all the aspects. Moreover, he disputed the conclusions of the autopsy report, highlighting that it didn't specify a cause of death. Heather and Ernest's lawyers passed their opinions in public, calling the prosecution's theory just false. According to them, it was the prosecution's strategy to sway public opinion on the case to keep Heather and Ernest Franklin from being given a fair trial. In May 2017, Ernest Franklin pleaded not guilty to the charges. However, after deliberating for just an hour and 40 minutes, jurors in Chenango County Court returned a guilty verdict.
A Chenango County man will spend at least the next 20 years behind bars. Ernest Franklin of Mount Upton was sentenced to 21 years to life in prison on Monday. Franklin and his wife Heather worked together to kill their 16-year-old son Jeffrey, who had disabilities, back in March of 2017.
Ernest was also convicted on additional counts of third-degree arson and tampering with physical evidence. As a result of these convictions, he was sentenced to life in prison. On June 7, 2017, just one day before her trial was set to begin, Heather pleaded guilty to felony charges of first-degree manslaughter, third-degree arson, and tampering with physical evidence. As a result of the plea deal, Heather was handed a maximum sentence of 7 years in prison, with an additional 5 years of supervised release upon her release. When given the opportunity to speak in court, Heather remained silent. Her defense lawyer, Michael Trossett, said that she had taken full responsibility for her actions. In her plea deal, Heather Franklin also admitted that she knew of Ernest's actions while leaving the property on the tragic day her husband murdered Jeffrey. Had her case proceeded to trial, the evidence would have highlighted her mistreatment of and frustration towards Jeffrey, which likely would have led to a significantly harsher sentence. With the truth now out in the open, the people who stood by Ernest and Heather, who believed in them and supported them, felt utterly betrayed. It was a huge shock for their grieving friends and family that Ernest and Heather really did murder their son Jeffrey. The GoFundMe page for Heather and Ernest was taken down with a promise to the donors that their money would be refunded.
I don't know the circumstances. I don't know exactly what happened or what they did or whatever. I can't imagine the fear that was going through his mind, and that really bothers me. All I can hope is it was over quick and he didn't suffer. Sorry.
We remember his laughs, his favorite signs, things that he would do, his quirky little things that he would do. We remember those things, and we remember him often. He deserved a lot more.
Like many foster children, Jeffrey too longed for stability and a sense of family. He'd often hug strangers and even ask spectators at baseball games to share their French fries. Jeffrey developed a deep fascination with trains and cartoon characters, so much that he once wore the mustache from his Mario Halloween costume to school for an entire month. All Jeffrey ever wanted was a mom and a dad who would love and care for him unconditionally. But unfortunately, Heather and Ernest were unable to provide that for him for long. Instead of stepping into a home filled with love, nurturing, and protection, Jeffrey entered a vastly different reality. For the final time in his short life, Jeffrey was failed by the very people who were supposed to keep him safe and secure. Heather and Ernest had other options available to them if they felt so overwhelmed by the responsibility of raising a 16-year-old boy with special needs. They could have returned him to his aunt, Jennifer Austin, who loved him dearly, or they could have given him up for adoption altogether. Instead, they chose the most sinister path imaginable. Currently, Ernest is serving his prison sentence at the Attica Correctional Facility and will have to serve a minimum of 21 years before he's eligible for parole in 2038. Heather's incarcerated at the Bedford Hills Correctional Facility for Women, where she'll be eligible for parole in 2025. Meanwhile, the couple's currently 7-year-old son is reportedly under the care of his grandparents. Because of the intense fire, Jeffrey's body had been severely burnt, and a lot of things couldn't be determined by the medical examiners. If the condition of Jeffrey's body had been better, do you think it would have shown evidence that he faced abuse at the hands of his adoptive parents? Heather and Ernest made sure to wipe out as much evidence as they could by making sure the fire consumed the whole house. What sinister truths do you think they were successful in hiding? The autopsy report stated that Jeffrey's death was caused by violent force. Do you think Ernest actually murdered Jeffrey? Let us know your thoughts. We'd love to hear from you. If there's a case you'd like us to cover, don't hesitate to drop your recommendations in the comment section below. For more captivating true crime stories, like, share, and subscribe to M7 Crime Storytime. If you appreciate our content, consider becoming a member and unlock early access to exclusive content.